Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we are glad you joined us. Coming up, we're going to be taking a look at the midterm elections, what went right, what went wrong, and what it all means. Former New Jersey Governor Christie Whitman is standing by. She's one of the founders of the Forward Party. They're a group of Republicans, Democrats, and independents who say they are fed up with the partisan divide. That's later. First, we have Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman here. The Democrat represents New Jersey's 12th congressional district, which takes in parts of Mercer, Middlesex, Somerset, and Union counties. Congresswoman, welcome to the show. Congratulations on winning re-election in the 12th congressional districts. Good to see you.
Thank you, Laura. It is good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's just get your initial thoughts on how the midterms played out. Your thoughts.
I think that they certainly turned out in recognition of the work that Joe Biden's administration and the Democratic legislature, federal legislature, has been doing. I think people have rejected some of the extremism of the election deniers and things of that nature. I think there's a signal that the people in this country want us to get back to doing our work, doing it together, and doing it more civilly. So on the one hand, I'm pleased that there was this no blowout of any sort. I still don't know all of the final count as it relates to the House of Representatives, but either way, it's going to be very close. And so I think that that's a signal people need to recognize. We need to work together better.
Well, as far as the Democrats and their performance goes, they really did outperform. Typically, the normal incumbent party loses massively or significantly in a midterm election, and that didn't happen. At this point, like you said, the House is still up in the air, but it looks like Republicans will win a slim majority. Still don't know. It'll be close either way. The House is very close. Democrats control that. But generally, Democrats really did outperform what they typically do. Why do you think that is?
I think that people recognize that democracy was on the ballot. I think that a woman's right to make decisions regarding her reproductive health care was on the ballot, and other issues are on the ballot that people care about. And I think that this was an unusual midterm election because there's been this divisiveness, but there's been, Democrats have been trying to do the job, whether or not it's the Inflation Reduction Act, the Competes Act, whether or not it's trying to codify Roe v. Wade, making sure that people had access to their prescriptions. The prescriptions were going to be, the costs were going to go down because we provide the opportunity for Medicare to negotiate, things of that nature. Democrats were responsible for child tax credits during the pandemic and putting money into households. I think people saw the work that we did, but I think we had to overcome a lot of misinformation, a lot of loud noise, and to some extent it may have discouraged some people to get out to vote. But by and large, I think that the country has signaled that it wants to go in a more civil direction and a more and a bipartisan direction. They expect us to do our job, and our job means that we're going to have to work with one another on behalf of our constituents. What I'm concerned about is that Republicans have already signaled, should they get in a majority, they're going to work against things like the woman's right to choose. They're going to look at Medicare and Social Security and think that they could be held hostage to addressing the debt ceiling that we may have to lift, things of that nature. The good news is that having won the Senate, we're not going to have to worry about that actualizing in legislation that gets before the president. And having the president, we don't have to worry about his not vetoing something that does get there, squeezes by the House and then gets through the Senate. And I'm grateful for that. But it's going to be a rough period, I think.
Yeah. Well, how do you think the outcome is going to influence the legislative agenda as we head into a new session of Congress once 2023 rolls around? What do you think the issues will be? Like you mentioned, you thought that Republicans would bring up certain issues, but again, the public definitely sent a message on Election Day, and they want people to be productive, not caught up in the politics of performance. They want them to get to work
Yeah.
and bring back resources for the people who they represent.
Exactly. So I am hoping that we're not spending a whole bunch of time fighting over trying to dismantle healthcare again, like they did before. That they recognize that people believe that they have a right to accessible and affordable healthcare, and that we'll work together to ensure that a greater number of people have that access. This whole issue of making it in America, I think, is something that we should be able to work on together. I hope that Republicans are willing to acknowledge that we have a lot of work to do with regard to protecting our climate, our environment for the next generations, and that this is not political and it's not hoaxy or it's not any of that hooey stuff, that it's stuff that we need to work on together. I am concerned that the legislative agenda might be sacrificed in the House if people are going to fulfill their promise, if we have a Republican majority, to dismantle, to try to impeach a president, and do those sort of vengeance is mine kind of thing. I hope we don't go there, but we have some troubling signs that we might. But, we need to make sure that the programs that support our people, whether or not they're elderly or young or education, I think that the whole student debt issue has got to be addressed and it's got to be codified. Republicans don't seem interested in doing that, but if it were my legislative agenda, it would be on it. And so you'll probably see competing agendas.
Yeah. So in New Jersey, when the congressional districts were redrawn, most of them, most of the districts were relatively safe. We saw some races, beforehand a little bit more competitive. But where the Democrats did lose the 7th congressional district, where incumbent Tom Malinowski is in office right now, Tom Kean Jr., former state senator, won. Now, in your days in the legislature, did your paths cross then? And, what do you think of Tom Kean Jr. coming to, as a Republican, coming in and being a part of New Jersey's congressional delegation?
So our paths did cross. I mean, we did serve in the same in the same assembly together, so we know each other. And if he follows the pathway of his father, then I think that he will be serving his constituents better. If he moves into that sort of right-wing extremism that's taking place in the House, words he uttered and positions that he sort of took during the campaigning, that would be very disappointing. And I think that it would be disappointing to his constituents. I think New Jersey New Jersey Republicans, by and large, are of the sort of old school. We may have changes, we may have differences in what we believe in, but we believe in the institutions and we believe in government and we believe in the dignity of people. And we had a history of working together. Now, if Tom comes with that in mind, and be the kind of sort of moderate person he had been before in the legislature, I think he'll serve his constituents fine. If not, I think he'll be a one-term.
And also, looking to, before he gets there, lame duck, are there any issues that you have that you want to definitely get to? Because again, it looks like at this point the Congress will be controlled by Republicans. Any particular projects you're working on that you really want to get through during the lame duck session?
Well, for one, I'm working on the Crown Act.
Oh, yes. Let's hear about that. Yeah. I've heard about this, but for the viewers who may not know, we're not talking about the Netflix series The Crown, as in the tiara. We're talking about hair.
We're talking about hair.
Hair.
Yeah. We're talking about non-discrimination in the way you wear your hair. and protecting people to be their authentic selves and recognizing that your credentials or your credibility, your ability to do a job or live in an apartment or whatever, buy a house, has nothing to do with what you have on your head. So the Crown Act passed in the House. We needed to pass in the Senate. It is bipartisan in both houses. I would love to see it pass during lame duck.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was there a particular person or somebody that inspired you to get behind this? And it is also backed by Republicans as well. It's not a Democrat. It's not one particular issue. It is many people support this.
Yeah. Not any one issue, but I mean, there are certain experiences that I saw, like the young wrestler, I think his name is Andrew Johnson from New Jersey, who had to have his locks cut right in front of everybody right before his match because a referee determined that for some reason they weren't appropriate and that was inappropriate, and he had to stand there and have that happen in front of everyone. And then he went on and won his match, which made me very proud. That hurt me to see that. But there are other illustrations. I mean, working through this legislative process on this bill, people shared their stories about how they were treated because of the way they wear their hair, how they were not promoted, not considered, things of that nature. So it's a real issue. It is a civil rights issue. It's not just about hair. It is about what that hair communicated to people. So for me personally, that's a bill that I would love to see get passed. We have some government funding bills that we have to get passed.
Yeah, one other piece of legislation that might be already passed by the time this comes to air actually was originally written by some students in Hightstown, I believe, the Civil Rights Cold Case investigation.
Yes.
And this was originally written by students. So, and well, I'll let you go ahead. Can you explain what this is?
Yes, it is legislation that puts resources into opening up and re-examining cold civil rights cases that were not completely addressed. So I'm actually probably going to be speaking on the floor about that bill this afternoon because it's coming out of the Rules Committee. It came from the Senate. We already, I think, passed it once. I guess there's some modifications, but I'm excited about that bill, that it came out of a community that I represented, and it represents a sort of a dignity and concern with young people about what has happened in our past. And I'm reminded of, there's a movie out right now about Emmett Till and what happened to him. And then I guess within the last year or so, they identified the woman who had miscued, let me just say miscued someone about this young man, and it resulted in his death. Right. And nothing happened. The grand jury, I think, chose not to pursue it.
Right.
That's wrong.
Yeah. They didn't. Yeah. I guess there wasn't enough evidence, and my mind is blanking on the woman's name, but there wasn't enough evidence to indict.
Well,
but that's what this case is the civil rights cold case is inspired young people and getting young people to be engaged. A lot of people are really turned off of politics. During COVID, so many people watched, and they really, our young people got really up to speed on so many issues. And then, you see all of this fighting. So to see something by students in your district coming to the floor, that's amazing.
Young people got really involved in this election, standing up for the issues. And if those were not old enough to vote, they still marched, they still volunteered, they were working on campaigns. I just left the campus of Howard University, having a very rich discussion on the Crown Act, but that wasn't the only thing that came up in the discussion. Our students are paying attention, and they need to pay attention because things like student debt forgiveness, that affects them. So we really need to be connecting with our young people, the younger generation, on what we're doing in Washington and how it impacts you. And so I was speaking to one of the vice presidents at the school, and I said, this was a rich discussion that we had here, but there's so many other issues that we really ought to have conversations with students, because then they can communicate information, knowledge, and the urgency of engagement to their peers. And that's what we need to do to solidify our democracy.
Right, right. Getting out there, getting involved, and hearing from their elected people instead of what they see on social media, what they see on the news sometimes.
Yes.
That can be skewed.
And holding us accountable.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it. You got a lot going on in Washington, D.C. and here in New Jersey. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Laura. Hope we get to have some conversations as we move through this 118th Congress.
Oh, I look forward to it. Joining me now is former Governor of New Jersey, Christie Todd Whitman. She is also co-chair of the Forward Party. Governor, good to see you.
It's always good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Governor, people are still trying to take a look at the midterms. They're trying to figure out what went right, what went wrong. We know both Republicans and Democrats, they seem to really hate each other. So much partisanship, so much anger. What is the Forward Party seeing?
Well, first of all, the election was the American people standing up and saying enough already. We've had it. We're not the extremes. We don't like this nasty rhetoric. We don't like the people who keep trying to analyze the 2020 election. It's over and done with, and we want people who are going to respond to what we need done. And they were very clear about that. I mean, if you look at the number of election deniers who were defeated, it's almost universal. So it really was the American people speaking out and saying, we want another way, we want another choice. And that's where Forward comes in, because right now we're as much a movement as we are a party, because we're not on the ballot recognized as a party in any state yet, although we have active organizations and we have members in every state in the union, but active organizers in 45 who are working now to get us on the ballot. And what we are is we'll say, look, we will support Republicans, Democrats, independents, as long as they agree with our basic philosophy, which is, thriving communities, economic opportunity for all, belief in the Constitution, support of the Constitution, respect for the rule of law, and a willingness to change the way we elect our representatives, meaning for us at this time, it is open primaries and ranked choice voting to give everybody an opportunity to be heard and to really force candidates to speak to all of their constituents and represent their constituents, not some amorphous party in Washington that tells you this is how you have to believe on this, that, or the other thing. And then we will run candidates where there aren't candidates. There are 500,000 elective positions across the country. And in 2020, 70% of those were uncontested. That's just wrong. Everybody should have a choice.
And you bring up something interesting about that people are trying to analyze and figure out right now. And that's when you talk about listening to your constituents. It doesn't seem that there was any one particular issue that people, Republicans might have campaigned on one thing, Democrats campaign on another. But in order to win, you really need to listen to the issues, because the polls seem to be getting it wrong. Why are the two parties, they don't seem to be listening, except to certain television stations or certain polls that seem to be skewed and are getting it wrong?
Well, because it hasn't been to their advantage. It's to their advantage to keep issues alive, not to solve the problems, because all they need to do, they have felt in the past, is activate their base. That small percentage of the overall potential voters who vote either Republican or Democrat.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the Democrats. They were able to really beat expectations in the midterms. Typically the party in power loses. They didn't lose as much. It doesn't seem like anybody's really happy with the results. And as we speak, things are still coming in. They're still changing. But it doesn't look like anybody was really particularly happy. But the Democrats didn't do as bad as they thought they did. So what do you make of that?
Well, again, I think it was because so many of the Republican candidates were MAGA. And using that rhetoric, using that hate rhetoric that people just don't like. That's not who we are as an American people. We are in the center. We're not this kind of an electorate. And they said enough. And so many of those Republican candidates said, I'm going to, the gubernatorial candidate, the Republican gubernatorial candidate in Minnesota, I believe it was, said, or Wisconsin, I can't remember which it was, who said, if you elect me, Republicans will never lose again. And that's not what we believe in as a democracy. And, you know, a lot of people talk about, was there an issue that really pushed voters? I believe a lot of voters went into the polls saying, you know, the economy is a huge issue and I care desperately. But when they looked at their choices, they said, but I care about democracy more. And, you know, they may not have been pro abortion, but they didn't like the idea of this government overreach, such a huge government overreach, and they were reacting to that.
Yeah.
And
So what do you think? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to say, so I really, it was the American people speaking out saying, we want some sanity here and we want people who will talk to one another and solve our problems.
Yeah. So what do you think that this message, will it resonate, this political climate heading into next year? Do you think that things will calm down and not be as angry?
Well, at Forward, we're going to be working as hard as we can to make sure of that. We're going to have candidates in these local elections and in by-elections. We are going to be getting that message out that there is a third way. And actually, it's interesting, ranked choice voting was on the ballot in a lot of places, and it did very well. And some of the more extreme measures, there was one in Arizona, for instance, that would have stopped any kind of real reform, and that was defeated. So the public understands that we've got to do better in the way. They don't like just having the choice of a Republican or a Democrat, because they tend to be to the left or the right, getting more extreme every day, it seems, because of the way we've drawn our districts. And so they're saying we want something different.
Yeah. Well, speaking of districts, and districts are redrawn here in New Jersey, pretty much status quo. The one place where Republicans were able to pick up a seat was that of the 7th District. Tom Malinowski, Democrat, lost to Tom Kean Jr., who is a former member of the Senate, son of a former governor. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that particular race and how you think Tom Kean Jr. will do transitioning from being a state lawmaker, moving into Washington, D.C. as a congressman.
Well, he certainly had a lot of experience now in being in the legislative branch. And so that's going to serve him well. It's going to be very different in Washington with leadership. But I think leadership, Kevin McCarthy's in some trouble. And I don't know whether he will, in fact, be the leader. But Tom Kean Jr. is not an extreme MAGA person. So he's going to have some battles on his hands. And, you know, that was a function also. That district was redistricted and made more Republican. It was basically the Democrats sacrificing Malinowski. And it won. And Tom ran a good race and won handily. I mean, it wasn't close from that perspective. He'll find it's different playing at the national scene, and it's much more partisan than what was happening in the state legislature. But he's got a lot of experience in that and handling it. So I think he's going to do fine. He'll be fine.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Forward Party. And before we look to the next elections campaign cycle, how did your candidates do this time around? I was looking on the social media. It looks like you had some victories. So do you care to talk about that?
Sure. Well, we won 2 out of the 3 of the Senate candidates we endorsed, Lisa Murkowski and Mark Kelly. We lost Evan McMullin in Utah, but that was always going to be a stretch because that's a pretty hard red state, Utah, and he was running as an independent. But otherwise, down ballot, we did quite well. I mean, we didn't win everything, obviously, but we won enough to show that, in fact, people running with the kind of platform that we had put forward are the kinds who get a good response from the public. And they were quality candidates, too. I mean, we were pretty careful in our selection. And a lot of the selections, the way we do it is it comes from the states and the counties. They are the ones who put forward the candidates they think we ought to be endorsing. And then, of course, obviously, we run a check on them, too, to make sure they are who they say they are. But we're respecting, to the 99% of the time, we're respecting the choices of the locals. So what you're doing is you're getting candidates that people recognize. They come from their towns, their homes. They know them in many instances, and they can speak to the issues of that community or that county or that state in a way that someone who is chosen just by a political party, by the operatives of a political party, doesn't necessarily represent. And our candidates spoke to everybody.
Yeah, and as far as outreach and getting people engaged, my daughter just turned 18 over the summer, and I was asking her, about voting in the first election, and I thought what she said to me is what I hear sometimes. I'm curious if you hear it as well about the election. She said, I don't really like either side And I said, yeah, a lot of people feel that way. So young people, they want to be involved. They are excited. They spent 2 years in lockdown, and a lot of them got very involved, and they have a better understanding of the issues than, my generation certainly did. So how do you seize upon that and get them engaged in a productive way?
Well, the internet is a big part of that. I mean, social media is where they get a lot of their information. But also, again, as I said, we have active leaders, team leaders in 45 of the states. It may be more than that now. We want to have them obviously in all 50. We do have members from all 50 states. And one of the things and one of the places we want them to concentrate is on college campuses, showing young people that there is another way and giving them the opportunity to participate and forward, as well as just doing it in general. For instance, in Texas, we had it was back in October, we had kind of a rally there. We had over 1,000 people who signed up for it. They organized, we have active organizations in 7 or 8 of the biggest counties in Texas. The ones that really pull in the vote. And those, again, that's how we break it down to the county level and the local level. It's different than what the current 2 parties are doing at the moment. And so it's a way to reach precisely people like your daughter.
Well, Governor Whitman, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Thank you. It's really good seeing you.
Good to talk to you. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. And that will do it for today. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.